Georgia has lost 2 games in 3 years. They've won as many national championships as games they've lost in the last 3 seasons. This decade, they've lost 4 games total. We're entering a new time in the college football playoff world. Well, it is a college football playoff world, isn't it? Now 12 teams in the competition. Georgia, one of the biggest brand names in the country. And yet, former Alabama quarterback and ESPN personality or play-by-play guy or color commentator Greg McElroy had this to say the other day. He said, "I think Georgia is kind of flying under the radar in a weird way, aren't they?" He goes on to say, for a team that's going to be ranked number 2 at worst, they're going to be ranked number 1. So maybe number 1 going into this season. We haven't talked about them enough. Well, there's a lot going on at once, as it relates to Georgia. I think the thing that's taking the most oxygen out of the room is Ohio State. Frankly, I mean, I can't go really. It is June, and so there's a lot of people talking about a lot of stuff. I think naturally one conversation is Nick no longer being at Alabama. You no longer have Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Kalen DeBoer is no longer at Washington. They're, 3 of the teams that were in the playoff this past year, they don't have their head coach coming back this year. Texas, I think, is something to talk about for sure, but none of those teams I just mentioned have consistently done it lately. That's an important thing to remember for all of us, frankly. But they're, not talking about Georgia, to me at least, we talk about Georgia every day. That's our job. That's what we've done for coming on 25 years. But part of the reason why I think there's not a lot of discussion right now is Georgia's not fancy. They're not new. They're not sparkling. They didn't accomplish their goal this past season. I think people don't believe in Florida State. That's why, there's not. Well, I think that the Georgia win over them this last year and the way that they closed coming out at the end of the season, that's a lot of damage for Florida State. Teams like Clemson, Tennessee, who's in that world? I would put LSU above those two. They're just not. I mean, there's not a notion that those 2 teams would win the national championship. Virginia Tech. I mean, they haven't mattered in a long time. There's suspicion about Oklahoma. There's a lot to talk about right now that doesn't involve Georgia. They are like a really solid blue chip stock that consistently gives you dividends. You're not worried about what Georgia's going to do. They're Coca-Cola in the 70s and 80s. You're going to get your money. I mean, they're not Apple. They're not fancy. No, fancy is the wrong way. Or NVIDIA. They're not these companies that are just like, that's not what they are. They are a consistent, solid thing that is always there. Is Georgia going to win the national championship? I don't know, but I know this: they have as good a chance, if not better, than everybody else in the country. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about the transition in Alabama to Kalen DeBoer. All of the players that are transitioning to Ohio State. My one issue with Ohio State, one of the main issue at Ohio State is we just don't know how their quarterback will be. We don't know that right now. Texas, they've got to come into a new league. What's changed with Georgia? Like, nothing's changed with Georgia. So when Greg's talking about, why aren't we, Georgia's, the exact quote is, I think Georgia's kind of flying under the radar in a weird way. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but there's reasons why. They, once more, you've got a returning coordinator, both of them, they're back. You've got the returning quarterback, he's back. That didn't happen last year. There aren't as many questions for Georgia as there were a season ago. And, and that's okay. I mean, every single year doesn't have to be that you're wondering, I don't know, there's so many, what's the word? Questions in our world are a great way to create and talk about content. And, that's a very important thing this time of year. As a content creator, I can assure you that's a very important thing this time of year. But Georgia's got it, I wouldn't say locked in, but there's just fewer questions with them as there are with other folks. Our friends at EcoPoly are now SoPoly, same exact company, same awesome quality products made in the heart of Georgia and Dodge County. I'm showing you where the dealers are in the state. This is in Gwinnett. This is in Norcross. And not that far from Graves Elementary School on I-85. They have so many great dealers out and around the country. This is, just as an example, the Man Cave store. So you can check them out. You can get all of this stuff that I'm showing you all the time. You can customize your backyard. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I was looking at someone's backyard yesterday or just earlier today. They were showing me, I've got a new outdoor kitchen, which is really awesome. You can customize your outdoor kitchen. Look at these cushions that you can order. I mean, it's really good quality. You need to check SoPoly out. Make sure that you're checking them out when you're redoing something or when it's time for a change. The quality is outstanding. You're not going to get that anywhere else. Make sure you're getting it from the dealers. You can call them 478-374-6398. But speaking of calling people, it's going to be a tough call. Seeing who is the 2? For me, it's Ohio State. Who is the 3? That's a tougher call. It's hard to know for sure who the number 3 team is coming into this thing. Now, if you mosey on over to the odds makers, I believe it's Texas. And, my only hesitation with Texas, there's a few. They've got to play Georgia. They've got to play Michigan. They've got to play at Texas A&M. They can lose all 3 of those games. They certainly can lose all 3 of those games. Oregon is right behind Texas, and then you've got Alabama at 1,400. So Georgia's plus 300. Those are pretty solid odds, to be honest with you. Ohio State at plus 430. Texas at plus 800. Oregon at plus 850. And then you got to go a little bit, almost double, not quite double, back to Alabama at plus 1,400. And then Ole Miss at plus 1,500. I mean, people to Greg's question or point, I think it's really a point more than anything. You look at these top teams. I mean, as someone that's not in the top, I'll just say 10 here. Top 10, according to the betting odds, are Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Alabama. Is someone going to win the national championship that's not those 5 teams? Seems unlikely. Anyway, LSU. Ole Miss, LSU, Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan. Is someone outside of those top 10 teams, are they going to win the national championship? Could Florida State, could Tennessee, could Missouri? Missouri has better odds to win the national championship than Clemson. Well, neither of them are going to win it, but that's something to digest. I mean, it's curious. Florida State at 2,800. Ohio State's got some stuff that I would be concerned about if I were them. That's a lot of new moving parts. You have a new offensive coordinator. You have a new quarterback. You have a new conference. It's not new for Ohio State, but you are eating the Oregon game. That's my worry with Ohio State. The good news for Ohio State and sort of anybody else in a way is you have the whole season to not lose multiple. Ohio State is not going to Ohio State's not going to not get in the play. I mean, they are going to be in the playoff. That's pretty much all there is to it. I think for me, for Ohio State, the question is, are you where you need to be in December? Because lately the answer to that has been no. I mean, they were where they needed to be against Georgia and they lost the game. But if you look at this schedule, it's just not, the Big Ten is not a good league right now. It's better than it was, but these Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, and then they start with the Big Ten. So the beginning of the season, not difficult at all. And you've got at Michigan State, no. Iowa, no. At Oregon, that's a huge game. That's a huge game that will be determinative of a lot of things for both those teams. You got a week off. You host Nebraska. At Penn State, sounds worse than it really is. Almost always. Purdue, They're not playing at Northwestern. They're playing at Wrigley Field. I'm not sure I understand that Northwestern. I mean, I understand it, but you're going to have you're going to have a stadium full of Ohio State people. Anyway. And then they host Indiana, and they host Michigan. They should not lose more than one game. And that one game would be Oregon. If they've lost 2 games, something's wrong. It won't be about wins and losses for Ohio State necessarily. It will be about how are they playing. And, at the end of this past season, Ohio State, they did not play well at times. And I think that's the thing for me is with Georgia, and when I say Ohio State didn't play well at times, they got worked against Michigan. And then Missouri did basically the same thing. And then people say, well, Missouri at the bowl game. Yeah, they played the game. That's what you do when you play bowl games. And Missouri worked them. So I think that's the concern for me is not do they have a bunch of really great players. Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, they're always going to have really great players. But can Ryan Day get this to where he's supposed to? I don't know. And if you're wondering why people aren't, quote, talking a lot about Georgia or they're flying under the radar, they're not flying under the radar. We're just not talking about them. And that'll be shown as the season goes on.